is just, it's absolutely mind-blowing, the amount of information we were able to pull out of that card. So what we're going to do here with Michael is go in detail and try to dissect these points one by one and really bring some clarity here. So Michael, welcome back, and thank you so much for doing the show with me.
Thanks a lot, mate. Nice to be back.
So the Hermit, this is something that, I don't know, in my personal life, I kind of feel like I've become a bit of a hermit myself. I used to be in the big city, and now I'm out here in the woods, and I'm thoroughly loving it, being a little bit closer to nature, going inward, taking that time to not let all the noise of the world distract me from my own personal direction. And I think a lot of other people that I'm talking to are really feeling that vibe, and that seems to be the sentiment so far with those that I've seen commenting on the actual video that you produced there with Chris. So maybe we can get into an overview of this card and how it spoke to you.
Well, you're right, and I envy you and everyone else that has made that change to get into nature. It's very, very important. It's a difficult thing to do, but it's worth the effort, whether one's alone or with a family. I'm a big believer that it has to happen, because throughout my works I'm always talking about that man is in conflict with his culture, which is mostly people. I'm talking about there with other people, and all of the variegation and all of the difficulties there. And then you also have this background, the Umwelt, as it's called in German philosophy or psychology, and that's the natural order. And given that our cultures, particularly in the West, have become so bankrupt, so anemic, so utterly hypocritical and false, we have solutions. It's not just fatal. We don't have to be fatalistic about it. We always have to remember that there's the Umwelt. There is the natural world of animals and objects and elements, and we need to get back to that. So if our culture fails us, we have a tremendous duty as human beings, as individuals, to try and put that culture right. But there's no reason we need to be sickened by that process, or even in the midst of that process. Once upon a time, when cultures were more holistic, when they were more moral, is the word I prefer to use, then, oh yeah, we could stick it out, we could live near to others, and we could have a sense of community. But as that started to, discohese, as that started to get corrupted, and there's many, many ways it gets corrupted, then there's no real reason, you see. We have another home, we have another place to be, we have another environment, and that's nature, that's the woods, that's the lakes and the rivers and the trees, and so we can go there and repair to the woods, repair to nature, and set about then being hermits, but at the same time keeping one ear on the headlines, one eye open, never foregoing our cultural duty. This is a huge mistake. I know a lot of people want to run away to caves. They often do this by going to the East and removing themselves from all kind of culture, and I don't believe that's correct. I think that's alienating, and it's also unspiritual.
Right.
Part of our spiritual journey is because we are meant to not only repair the culture if it should be going bad, but we're meant to add to it. It's part of our own self-development and spiritual progress. This is what I was trying to talk about in the Hermit, is that when you've got these three worlds, the Eigenwelt of the individual, inner being, inner landscape, the Umwelt of the natural world, and then you've got the Mitwelt, or the social world. You see, we have responsibilities in all three areas. One does not dominate. And when the person wants to abstract too much and become overly hermetic, there's a big danger there. And that means that you're withdrawing from the Umwelt and you're withdrawing from the Mitwelt into the Eigenwelt, and that is not holistic. That's going to end you up in neurosis, and derangement. Same thing that you see most people around you, they're absorbed almost entirely in the Mitwelt, meaning the social world, right? The cultural world is everything for them. They're like some crazy city, urbanized, maniacal, as you see in the wonderful movie we put at the beginning of the program, Local Hero, which is tremendously deep. It's presented as a comedy, but it is not a comedy. It is a very deep analysis of this very thing we're talking about people who are immersed entirely within the Mitwelt and have no idea. And so the hero in that is a man who then, ends up taking off his armoring, i.e. his suit and tie, and getting his feet wet in the natural world, and then craving that, literally converting to be, as you said, realizing the power of the Umwelt, and desperately wanting to get back to that from the naked, sterile, empty, vapid, hypocritical world, of the culture that he happens to be in, which has lost all sense of morality and closeness. And they beautifully show that in the movie, with these plate glass divisions and all sorts of other, divisions that there exist between people, both in a vertical way, a hierarchical way, and also even horizontally. Tremendous movie. And even that movie has very deep elements of astrotheology and astrology based into it. It's very much based on the Hermit. And it was wonderful that we were able to get that clip, and I hope people really go and watch that movie. But yeah, the whole theme is about immersing yourself totally in the midworld, which is, again, breeds a form of neurosis. And then even the man who becomes overly critical of his society doesn't seek to fix it and doesn't teach his children what's wrong to fix it, then that's another form of psychopathic, you see. So we're three beings in one, and we have a responsibility forever, eternally, in each of those realms. We have the responsibility within, we have a responsibility in culture, to fix culture, to add to culture. And we've got a responsibility then in the wider world, the Umwelt, the natural kingdom as well. So man is three beings in one.
And it's important that we balance those things. And I think for myself, what I was feeling was I was getting imbalanced completely in not having an ability to go within as much, not having that time to myself, constantly being surrounded by, other people's energy and having them sort of feed off of my energy in a way. And not that that's always bad. I mean, I was working a lot with children and teens and, people that required help. But when you're always giving, and you don't put your own oxygen mask on, and you don't recharge yourself, and you don't give yourself that time for inwardness and reflection, then you can get lost in that. And like, I'm the kind of person, I'm very sensitive to my body. I'm very sensitive to my thought patterns and whatnot. And I can tell the minute my energy is just getting completely sapped. And I remember in the past, I wouldn't listen to that voice that was saying, hey, you need to go and take some time. You need to, go and, draw something or just get your head out of it for a bit, And I would find I would start getting ill. I would have, the stress would just overwhelm me, and I wouldn't perform at my best in any of in areas that I work in. So now that I've achieved some better balance of kind of taking myself completely away for a while and just being with my family and just, having access to nature and taking a lot of long walks through the woods and just taking it all in, the amount of recharge that I feel is unbelievable. Like, I'm ready to go at this upcoming year, like like a bull. Like, I'm ready to go. But again, it's all about that balance point for people to be able to balance those three spheres, right?
Well, I agree with you. I've had problems with that myself. I've always been very attentive to my own needs, but never been able to fulfill them because of the intervention of other loathsome people and, the world and family and all of that rubbish. So I've always known what I wanted to do, but, my God, when you really come up against the obstacles, it becomes very, very difficult. And one thing follows on from another. And then you have to savor it. When you get those little moments, one has to savor it and try to recharge the batteries. And then if it can do what you're doing, which is, actually get out of it completely, even though that may come with a certain amount of sacrifices and difficulty, it's actually worth it in the end when you add up all the pros and cons. And you're quite right. It is about balancing these three areas in one, so that then our children grow up to know that they have a responsibility, so that there's no question of complete withdrawal. This is often considered a salvation, but this is not the way to look at it. That leads to neurosis, and the quicker the children know that, then even when they have severe problems emotionally or whatever, or difficulties with people, they aren't fooled into thinking that complete isolation is going to solve the problem, see, because their parents have said, oh, no, there has to be a balance. You will not be a complete self. You have no hope of being a complete self unless you are cultural, meaning you have to give to your culture, you have to create, you have to tend the gardens of the dead, or the people who helped you add to the culture. You have a big responsibility, built-in ontological responsibility to the culture. Then you have this other rapport with nature, which is a very personalistic thing. And then you've got your responsibilities to yourself. They flow in and out of each other. One is not more important than the other. And when you have evil or wrongness in the world, it's because one of these has indeed been made dominant. For instance, our Mitwelt is overwhelmingly made dominant by the kind of sociological nonsense. The nature is completely demeaned. This is the way we treatment of animals and the ecocide and all of that. So of course that's been downsized. The inner world has been completely occluded. And that's very complex how that happens. That's what I'm trying to do in Path of the Fool, to show you how the forces of religion, particularly, and then other forces, have helped to block man's selfhood, so that we're just completely, self-sadistic creatures. We don't really even have the understanding of how to get in touch with the self. We're mostly persona-driven, and that again is because of the Mitwelt, because of culture. See, because if our culture is aberrant, if our culture is malignant, which it is, then everything goes wrong. All the evil in the world is got nothing to do with anything supernatural. It's got nothing to do with even man as he really is in himself. There's an element of that, of course. Dealing with my Atlantis book, we all do have this proclivity to do evil, but it wouldn't come out. Even if there was no alien gene, say we just had the proclivity of evil just by being natural beings, it wouldn't come out if the culture hadn't become warped. If evil men weren't ruling, and if we had lost the way of penalizing them, which has happened across the board right now. You can just look at any headline, any of the world events today, and see that people have no judgment as to what evil is. And if you don't know what evil is, then you can hardly know what good is, you see. And so then from that follows the inevitable consequence is that evil men are able to grab the reins. I mean, of course, they can do this through their different fraternities, but we don't need to get into all of that. The fact is that evil men are able to grab the reins, confuse and confound good men who have several foibles. Good people often project their goodness onto other people. Good people make a lot of room for evil people. Good people are always forgiving. Good people are doing 101 things to perpetuate evil and haven't got the faintest idea in the world what they're doing. So my work is very much centered in that, trying to tell good people, do you know what you're doing? Can you see what you're doing? If you don't, you better fix it. So let's look at things like psychic vampirism. Let's look at all the different subject matter that I look into. But the underlying concept is, can good people stop forgiving evil? Can they start to understand that evil needs to be punished and that good needs to be rewarded? How complicated is that? I don't think it's very complicated, but it seems to be in our world. And so, we slowly try to rectify the situation and then, get back to some fundamentals. And once a person takes responsibility for their culture, we're on the right track. And we've got many, many great teachers to help us there. The Hegels and the Schellings, some of the people I mentioned. Then we turned to the body, the Eigenwelt. We did a wonderful thing there, on the shadow work and how that ties in with martial arts and certain Eastern practices. Another huge piece that's been missing from a lot of the spin doctors, in the New Age movement, because that's taking care of the Eigenwelt. Everybody knows they have an inner being. Everybody knows they got an inner landscape, but how do you fix it? How do you sanitize it? How do you keep it hygienic? How do you do that shadow work, which you've been talking about all the way through the series? But I was bringing up elusive things about shadow, that it's connected to time, it's connected to the relationship we have with our mothers, it's connected to delayed gratification, it's connected to the repression aspect, the association of our own parts of our own being, and those are a little bit more traditional. Psychologists pretty much know a lot about that. But as we move now into the Hermit, I wanted to bring up stuff that's really largely unknown through the work of Wilhelm Reich and small elements of other people like Grodek or say Heidegger to a degree, but basically full-on stuff that the Eastern people have understood, the higher Eastern mystical types, Taoists and Zen Buddhists and people who work within the martial arts who absolutely have this clinched. What they're doing is shadow work because they're bringing the inner house into harmony. Through the elaborate means that they do it. And either you can get into those traditions like you are, other people can say, I'm going to blend it together, I'm going to take 2 or 3 parts, and add other things I like, and create a kind of yoga of my own, so that you're keeping the bioenergy moving. And this is essential, because even if you do get into nature, even if you do work well with your culture, if the Eigenwelt is stagnant, and you're not in personal inner health, you're eating the wrong foods, or if you're not listening to that bodily intelligence we talked about, things will again go wrong. You'll only be able to function well for a while, and then all your good deeds will be overthrown because you'll fall apart from within. So the Eigenwelt also needs to be taken care of, the inner being, which so many people are neglecting. Our culture is just knee deep in sweet foods and alcohol and fast foods, as you all know. So that has to be completely cut out, and people have to get back to. So even if you are living in the city, is what I mean, and haven't got the ability to head out to nature, for lengthy periods of time, you can still naturalize your body. You can still do something good. You can bring nature to you in that interim period and clean out your meridians and clean out your body so that you're thinking, and your sympathetic and parasympathetic systems are working in greater harmony. And this is all the more true as I said in the program, for those who've been traumatized, I think everyone needs to do it, but anyone who's actually been through trauma, and I mean trauma, not stress, not just, oh yeah, well, life's a bit of a stressor. I mean full-blown trauma, where they've been abused or something else like that has happened, had major accidents or some other immense traumatic experience. Those people definitely need to deal with the inner house, because otherwise they're going to end up in the hands of the medicos, who are basically evil. You're giving yourself over to evil institutions otherwise. So there's a tremendous need for those people to get off their ass and deal with this problem, to reduce the trauma, the effects of trauma, to reduce the stress. And martial arts and qigong and tai chi, all of this is very part of it. It's all amounts to shadow work, and it's something that the Western world has really neglected, and it's lowering the immune system. Like you said, you're rearing to go. I want to see that in everyone. I want to see them being able to take on government. Because once you've got the energy, then you can overcome evil. If you don't have the energy and you're docile, well, the government's made you docile through the media, through the fast food, yeah, then of course you won't be able to have a mind that can ponder over the many solutions that people like me bring forth. You know that they're there maybe, but you can't do any cogitation on it because you're overloaded, you're flooded. At least if you work with your body's energy, that there's a tremendous well or a reservoir of energy. People think I got a team myself of over 50 people working for me. I get this email all the time, and I got to run my fingers to the bone saying, no, there's just me. I have people helping here, but over the whole course of my professional life, it's been a big zero. And I'm very grateful for the people like Chris and others who come in to help. I love that. But for the greater time of my existence and creating what I've done, it's been completely alone. It's been on the verge of impoverishment, most of the way, and there's been innumerable, it's been an unspeakably hideous journey. They don't even understand that because they think, the push of a button, you can call on all sorts of people to help you and assist you. I've had nothing but opposition, but you can't tell them that. They don't believe that. They've got their vision of what you've been doing and how easy it is, and how they wish they were in your shoes. All this nonsense.
Well, they themselves are projecting their own feeling of inner inadequacy onto other people. I see this all the time. I get it myself. Anytime you show confidence, anytime you speak with confidence or with passion or with eloquence or whatever, if you have a particular knowledge in a subject, you'd expect people to be like, oh yeah, let's do this, let's share this, let's express this. No, it's usually, who the hell do you think you are? You've got an ulterior agenda. You're just trying to prop yourself up. You've had it easy. I've had it hard. And so here we go with people having an inability to go within and just realize that, okay, if you've been dealt a bad card, or you had trauma in your life, or you had stress in your life, it is up to you to deal with that. To project that onto other people is not only the worst thing for them, it's the worst thing for you to do, because you're ignoring that shadow work and that inner work that you have to do yourself.
Yeah, and my point was that I'm able to do all of this it's not that there hasn't been help. There has. I'm not saying that, but for the vast majority of it, 95% of it is done on my own because of the energy I have. Because by keeping the inner house pure, by trying to get into nature as much as possible, by loving the knowledge for what it is, and by, as I said, fulfilling that duty that I have to the culture, even though I may hate aspects of that culture. I still understand the duty I have to the elders, to the ones who passed by, the Commons Beaumonts, the Wilhelm Reichs, and that kind of person, and the William Blakes. I continue doing diligently what I'm doing. There, I get the energy from that. I don't get it from an army of people. And anyone who even thinks that, oh my God, they don't know nothing about this kind of work or what it takes. And yeah, I'm glad when other people come around and we walk that road together for as long as it takes. But it's the reservoir within. I carry on even if there's not a single soul. I carry on if there's not a podcast to go on, or people to come and donate or whatever. I carry on anyway because I have the energy within, because I'm centered. I know the value of this work for the culture, and I also know I've been working on keeping the inner house clean so that you can digest these subjects. And then people go, oh, but you got so many things out there, man. Your work is more kaleidoscopic than any of the other guys out there doing this work. So that's impossible. You must be delegating. You can't be doing it all yourself. So they judge you by their own limitations. If they only knew, the amount of work that goes in of a day, of a week, of a month, of a year to get these books and, programs and all of that out. And yeah, one person is doing it. One person's conceiving it. And I'm not saying any of this to brag. I'm saying this because each and every one of the people I interact with can do the same thing. You know that, and I know that. Each of these people has infinite capacity. and I'm not going to sit there and take less. You know, you got your Nazims, you got your Bruce Liptons, you know, aren't they creating as well? You know, aren't they able to do it because they're inspired by what's going on? Wasn't Walter Russell, wasn't Wilhelm Reich? If you compare it to the genius of a Michelangelo or some of these other prolific people, you know, what the stuff I'm doing is easily seen to be in context. Our forefathers were incredibly prolific because they were deeply imbued with the spirit of working with their culture, not negating it, not being cynical about it like the kids are always being taught today. You got no place in it. Oh, and by the way, when the culture stops feeding you, like when it becomes bland and it run you know, like a vampire, you've sucked it dry. Well, then you just become disenchanted and gothic and all withdrawn. And yeah, man, it's all sucks. No, you suck, because that's what you've been doing. You haven't been adding to your culture. You've been sucking from it. So when you're bland and you're burned out, and some of the sensational things of the world are no longer satiating your toxic senses, then you're all against it. It was not millions of people we're talking about. That's not some small demographic. We're talking about even people in suit and tie who feel that way, and they're not happy until they're at some club getting some lap dances or whatever. You know, a wholly pornographic society that's just one way only. Feed me, feed me, feed me culture. Give, give, give. I'm bloated. I'm supersized. And then when you stop doing it, and when all the things become insipid, now I become a big cynic. I'm not even a critic. I haven't even got that far. I'm just a cynic of our society. What kind of people are these? They got the energy for sucking and taking from the culture, but they can't put a single thing back, and then blame the culture for its peccadillos and its inadequacy. What kind of people are we churning out? But see, that's a problem. But it can be turned around by people kids who fall in love with our culture. You know, because the parents are showing the artwork and reading the poetry and looking at the phenomenal movies and the great artwork in the galleries, and walking around the streets and looking at the architecture, incredible learning that there is there, all the stars above you, you know, and all of that. And when children are, you know, made aware of all of that through the years, then they realize they not only have a role, a built-in duty or work to preserve some of the better elements of culture, but they'll be automatically inspired to say, I want to contribute music to this, or I want to do this better than it was done before. I see the inadequacy of the way this was done once, you know, this kind of design or this kind of thing, and I now see that it can be done way better. And that's what creates a Wilhelm Reich, that's what creates a Walter Russell, a Nikola Tesla, improving things, whether it be in electronics, you know, or aerophysics, or, you know, whatever it may be. Perfecting and improving, not out of some just blind duty, but out of a loving duty towards your culture, because you realize that in doing that, you're learning and discovering more about your inner being, and you're not just doing it dutifully and slavishly. All the things that they blamed, you know, Hegel, and you know, they thought that Hegel was talking about that and being too authoritarian. None of that is true. Not even one word of that is true. He had a deep understanding of what man's connection is with his culture, and that if that culture is not solvent and holistic, oh my God, the consequences for evil, you know, it's enormous. Evil will just overwhelm the world, and that's what we're seeing, because man has forgotten about this tripartite, you know, aspects of himself, and he's been taught erroneously by people who've held high degrees. They're coming out of the universities, and yet they teach nothing of the stuff that, you know, you and I are talking about or dealing with, whether it's in The Path of the Fool or other works. You know, they don't teach this stuff. So again, our audience should pat itself on the back, because it's far more educated than what's coming out of the colleges and schools today, you know, by being into this kind of work. They should never, ever lose sight of that.
Yeah, it reminds me of something you brought up close to the beginning of this card, where you were talking about the Hermetic path and this old idea of forbidden knowledge, and everybody wants that forbidden knowledge, and they often think that they're going to find it in some book somewhere. And while, you know, books and many great writers can inspire this process, the process is really about gaining that forbidden knowledge within, you know, looking within and going down that process. And that really struck home with me, as, you know, I'm grateful for the many mentors and people that I've learned from and the books that I've read and acquired like that. But that's really just there to highlight and point for those times in my life when I get to actually discover these things within my own mind, within my own being, through practice and through, you know, introspection and through meditation. And so this whole path of the hermit, in a way, for this card is to me to really bring that out and to get people to understand that the greatest knowledge comes from within. And it also kind of struck me while you were talking about what we mentioned in the last interview a little bit about how people are starting to have this almost this hatred for the planet itself. They're kind of looking at the planet as if the planet is what the problem is. This planet is hell. This planet is a prison. This planet is somehow to blame, almost like in a Gnostic kind of viewpoint. We see this a lot in the New Age movement as well, where it's, oh, well, don't worry about it, just ignore everything that's happening. All you have to do is go to the extreme of just sitting there cross-legged meditating all the time and forget about the natural world, forget about your connection to nature and culture and your fellow man. That's all evil, and that's what's going to lead to evil. So it seems like there's two extremes here when we talk about this.
Yeah, it's true. I know a lot about Gnosticism. I'm not a Gnostic myself. People watch Path of the Fool. They'll see little droplets of Gnostic teachings through it, no doubt, and that's because as an eclectic person, I draw on from many traditions. But you're quite right. This is a totally ugly, spurious. In fact, in one of my articles on the Shelling Zone site, I also talk about the spuriousness of these Eastern teachings. I think it's in the last article number 6. I'm not quite sure, but I talk about Alvin Boyd Kuhn, and I talk about his brilliantly argued explanations of the ludicrousness of Gnostic teachings and also Eastern teachings which deny the body, deny the world. Like we've just been saying, if shadow work is really working with the body's intelligence, then how on earth can anyone justify, the denigration of the body, the denigration of the world of which the body is a part, and so on. But the agedness of the Hermit is very important because it's telling us that, a lot of people may learn about some alternative ways of looking at the world. But as you just said, it's about mulling them over. It's about cogitating them on in your own mind. Yes, a lot of those ideas may indeed come from other people. You may hear about them from other people. I mean, that's true for me. But the agedness is the hope and the rightness of life giving you enough time, enough life so that you're not only able to know about the subjects, but that you're able to really deeply mull on it. So it's twofold, isn't it? Life is twofold, and it's about knowing that there's alternatives and brilliant ideas and great thoughts and great ideas. And then it's about the time to actually sit lazily, give yourself the Wu way, do nothing. But in doing nothing, there's doing everything. To think on those thoughts and to make them your own. And for many people, life is too short. It doesn't give them that time. So then we have to learn how to expand it for ourselves, which is spend less time in the midwell, less time absorbed in chit chat with other people, and try to get into the greater discourse. Because life isn't going to hand it to us. We have to make that time for ourselves. So that's a key part of what the Hermit is also representing. Is not just the simple pocketing of facts, but the taking them out, the fondling them, the real deep contemplation on those ideas. Now, what we're getting on the internet right now is just knee-jerk reaction. Somebody like Michael Tsarion comes up and says, blah, 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 such and such a thing about sovereignty or about, and everybody just bleats out, a knee-jerk reaction. Nobody listens anymore. The art of hearing is completely gone. Everybody just wants to voice their own opinion without even thinking, what is this guy saying? Can I follow up on some of the sources that he's put there because he keeps on telling me that I should? They don't give a damn about that. They just immediately regurgitate whatever is in the top of their head. And it's sad to be a person like that. It's really, really sad. And they're going to have to learn in their own journey that that's not the way to respond. You certainly, before you try to compare yourself to somebody who knows a lot of stuff, might as well go and learn some stuff yourself.
Yeah, well, because you're doing more damage to yourself than to anybody you're aiming that at. From talking to these people here that are they're reacting, knee-jerk reaction, like you said. In a martial art sense, that's a horrible way to respond in a combat situation or a stressful situation. You must be able to, in the middle of that fire, in the middle of that chaos, you must be able to calm your senses to a point where you actually have control over your senses, and then you will be able to perceive the proper outcome or the proper solution. But as you said, in this fast-paced world where all the information is packaged, like as if you go through a McDonald's drive-through, you get a quick meal. Well, you go through the media online and you get a quick meal like that as well. People don't really get any chance to see what substance is anymore. They don't recognize something that's healthy. They don't recognize something that's holistic or something that's trying to get them to start thinking. Some of the best teachers I've worked with have always done these little things, not to answer maybe a question that I had, but just to help me find that answer myself. And oftentimes it's very subtle. It almost reminds me of that first Karate Kid movie where he's teaching them wax on, wax off. And he has no idea what he's doing. He thinks it's just crazy. He's like, why am I washing this guy's cars? He's just making me work for him. But really, there's a hidden lesson there that he's trying to teach him. And I've always liked those ways of helping people understand it. And you know what? It's not for everybody, and not everybody's going to be intelligent enough or alert enough to pick up on those cues and to take this journey on board for themselves. I think people are so afraid and they're so insecure in their own mindset that they're waiting for somebody else to tell them how to do everything. And the minute they hear something they don't like, they just react to it, and they don't realize the whole process is to go at this and discover the truth for yourself. Because people like us, we can only just point to these things, we can only reference these things, and everybody listening right now, it's up to them to digest it and take it on their own journey, as opposed to bashing around and just throwing mud at everybody. Like you have to take this on board in your own way.
And I'm trying to deal also with this reliability. When a person has become docile, when they're not actively involved in their culture or their self-development, then they're going to rely on the lies and the hypocrisy of science and religion. And we try to point out a few anecdotes about the duplicity and lunacy of some of the scientific ideas, especially when it comes to the body and the neurons and what thought is or what time is or any of this stuff. Absolute numbskull nonsense. And then we have the concept of religion, where it's always putting something or someone above the human. Well, there's nothing above the human, but we've fallen for that. We've fallen for these highers and lowers, and we fail to understand how to deconstruct. Most of knowledge is not acquisitive, it's deconstructive, it's apophatic. And so that is not being taught anywhere in the world. Outside, say, maybe a Krishnamurti school, perhaps a Steiner school or something along those lines, it's not being taught. So I'm one of the few people who actually teaches that it's not just accumulation of knowledge, or pocketing facts. It's about deconstruction, asking deep questions about what we already know and how we came to know it. There's a tremendous need for that. For instance, this whole concept we got into in The Path of the Fool about this lunacy of oneness, and that they can sell you oneness because they first sold you dualism. I mean, the moment that you bite down on dualism, which they've been doing since the 1700s, some of the most intelligent people in the whole wide world bought this hard dualism between, the mind and matter, or whatever way you want to describe it. But in buying that, they didn't realize what was being smuggled into their pocket, along with it, which is this concept of oneness, which has no validity. It's a complete jargon and nonsensicalness. And of course, wherever you put something, it replaces something more holistic. So our holistic ideas of wholeness, right, which is the Mitwelt, Umwelt, and Eigenwelt working together, that's not oneness. That's wholeness or allness. A very, 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 very different concept than oneness, which doesn't even exist. You see, so the whole world is infected by some of this mysteria, and it's from religion, partly, and it's also partly from science. And then when religion becomes bankrupt, it doesn't admit it. It doesn't bow out with integrity. When science is shown to be bankrupt, like it is now with the discoveries of the quantum universe, it doesn't bow out and say, well, guys, we got it wrong, so we're going to leave it to other mavericks now to explain it to you. No, they still want to hold on to the power that they have enjoyed, and we don't penalize them for it. And it's like the same thing has happened within philosophy. That when a particular philosopher, like say Karl Marx, for example, but there's many others, Bertrand Russell and many other philosophers, when their philosophies have proven bankrupt, I mean completely and totally, from within. Now what that means is that you didn't have to argue those philosophies from without. From within their own members, from with their own belief systems, they crumbled and fell to pieces, all right? It's incredible, isn't it? They fell underneath of their own weight. Instead of then resurrecting what they were reactions to, like going back to these original thinkers that were meant to be, pariahs. No, everything just moves on forward. Well, see, that's disingenuous. We can't allow that. If a particular philosophy, right, and I'll give you a concrete example, like Marxism was a reaction to Hegel. Okay, great. So for 100 years or so, half the countries of the world are deeply involved with Marxism. Then we all find out that almost every single one of the principles of Marxism is incorrect and wrong and completely wrong-headed. What do you think is the next step? Well, the first step is to get rid of that paradigm, and that happened. But what's the very next step? You go back and resurrect the original source from which it came, that it was the opposition for, right, or it stood against. But we never do that. So how then can we, as a society, progress? when you do the unjust. The just thing to do would be to go back to the original, which was debased, and which was corrupted, and which was skewed, and resurrect it and look at it again with fresh eyes. In doing that, you are doing something holistic. And in doing that, you're doing something just. And that is how progress is made. But if you don't do that, then you leave people in a void. You mean you've followed the Pied Piper, you've followed the wolf through, you've let the tiger lead you out of the long grass, but then you end up, half devoured. And it never occurs to you to go back to the original pristine thing that you now have categorical proof was misinterpreted. I mean, you know that. And now you should go back and reinterpret the original, and all will be well. And that's what I've done in my personal life, and all is well. But if the culture isn't doing it, then you see the great works of great people get thrown by the wayside, and we're bankrupt. We only then believe what the media throws up in front of us, which is just another temporary solution. It's just a prop to prop up a rotten structure, And we also work with this fallacy in our minds that, oh my God, who's gonna help us out of all of these conundrums? When 101 thinkers of the past, dating back thousands of years, has already done it, but we don't know anything about it. And this is, essential in my work that we do know this, and we are able to have that historical reviewing, which is what the Hermit's very much about, recapitulation. Plato called it anamnesis, the whole idea of relearning what we already know, a tremendously interesting concept there. And sure, we can do it as individuals, and we can also do it as a culture. There's no harm in recapitulation and going over what we thought we knew.
Yes, and then once we can get it to that stage, then we can even update it, and we can make it more current or whatever, and try to implement. I like the eclectic approach where there's so many different realms of knowledge. There's been so many great teachers that have come and brought these solutions forward, and there's already like you were saying previously. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. The solutions already exist. It's just that because our society and because of the power pyramid at the top has sort of taken control of the reins of our society, we've allowed that to happen. We've been put off track, and to get back on track, the solution would be to go back to a lot of the works that were destroyed, a lot of the people that were not, a lot of these guys aren't taught in school, a lot of these this information is not readily available. It's something that you have to really take on board yourself. You can't just rely on some expert or some authority figure to come along and pass it to you, because as we've done that, we've ended up in the situation that we're in today. So it only makes the logical sense that we go about it in the opposite way than we've been doing to this point.
Yes, and there's been many people who've tried to help us with that. There's been many people who've tried to give us this reverence. I hate to be philosophical about it, but if you turn to the work of, say, somebody like Schopenhauer, he was a very brilliant man in his own way, and he said that there is a metaphysical level to life or to philosophy, but it's not supernatural. The metaphysical starts with the Eigenwelt. So the metaphysical begins where your skin begins, right? Outside your skin is the external world, and that is governed by science and by reason. Internal world of your moods, of your emotions, of your thoughts, of your memories, and particularly memory is the one I'm thinking of the most. This is the metaphysical realm in which rulers and protractors and test tubes and laboratories have no meaning. What good is science for you when you're thinking about yourself inside? None at all. So it's anti-science, and it's metaphysical to that degree. And one of the things that makes up being, which is within your skin, right, and the contemplation of being, is memory. And see, when we're dealing with Virgo, which is a hermit, that's memory. That's the hermit's all about memory. And it's very interesting because the next constellation, or one of the very closest constellations, I'm thinking more about Nordic interpretation here, but even in astrology, one of the closest constellations to Virgo is Corvus, which is symbolized by the crow, which was one of the most sacred animals, in Nordic traditions. And it ruled the crows of Odin and their memory. So again, we have in astrotheology, we have in Nordic mythology, the crow representing memory. And that's right there, up there near the Virgo constellation. So this card and that sign is all about memory, anamnesis, metaphysics in the Schopenhauerian sense of you examining the inner landscape. That's what that man is doing. And then in doing it, it's not that he takes his eyes off the external world. He's holding that lantern up, isn't he? But all lights that you can hold up, I don't care if they're brighter than 1,000 suns, I don't care if they're the power of one single flashlight or one single torch or one single match. There's an aura of light penetrating out, but that has a boundary. All light has a boundary. And so what the hermit has understood is, for as much as is revealed by the light that he's shining, what he really comes to notice, and this is what fascinated Heidegger, the German philosopher, is how much I can't see because of my light, because of the very light of reason, because of the very light of knowing and the light of science. There's infinite stuff outside that, diffused light. There's a boundary to the light. The light just tells me how much is not in the light, how much is unknown. And so in doing that, then I start to look within, because there's that pre-conscious mountain of knowledge also is sort of hidden from me. But I have metaphysical abilities. One of them is memory. Everyone knows they've got memory, but there's other ones. Blake talked about imagination. There's intuition. There's all sorts of other moods. There's all sorts of other quiet senses. Briefly talked about them. Even, in fact, those are even being proven now by science, that at the brain stem, in the medulla and the lower parts of the brain, there are these other very interesting senses that are there for the fetus, and they get blocked later on in various ways, but we can tap into something more primordial. And then, as people like Blake and Schelling and others said, through art, through movement, through poetry and music and all of that, that other pre-conscious reservoir expresses itself. So it's not really that we can penetrate into it. That's completely wrong. And that's what the hermit is showing. You can penetrate somewhat into the outer world, but you don't penetrate into the inner world. No. What you do is you let the world penetrate into you. The inner world works quite differently. It's a bit like Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, little things go topsy-turvy. That world has its own voice. And it's for you through your art, through your music, through your poetry, through your stillness, and even through your yoga, even through, walking in the woods. There's ways that you can operate to let it speak. Now we're in the cacophony of the midwell. We're in the racket of the external world. And so that voice is speaking all the time, but we're no longer here. So one of the things about moving to nature, one of the things about adopting this more contemplative lifestyle, is that you let this inner reservoir speak to you in whatever way it will. And it will direct you to do so. It will direct you towards, say, gardening. It will direct you towards painting. It will direct you towards sculpture or some other activity. But now that activity is not just an occupation or a recreation. It is a vocation, and it's completely different. So even though the hands are moving and people look at you going, nothing untoward, they're just normal, they have no idea of the rapture that's involved in what you are doing. It's like what I said earlier about my work, I've got the energy for it because it's vocational, it's coming from within. And so whatever some chattering nitwit or knucklehead, is saying from the outside, and my motives, and he's making loads of money, he's really famous, he loves the fame, he's all into that, he gets the chicks or whatever, what does it matter what they say? It's utter nonsense. But I'm knowing it from within. And my knowing it from within, I know that other people can know that from within. And it doesn't matter what other people say. So you have to abstract from that midwell. First, you should, find a way to work well with the midwell. You shouldn't just be breaking these connections. But you should then, have these rope bridges that lead you back to the world. Fantastic. But you should then abstract from that to a degree and awaken this inner knowing. And it's not, psychoanalysis and all of these things. It's not about penetrating. It's about listening. It's about being profoundly quiet and listening to what they have to say. And that is one of the other metaphysical, that's the true metaphysical work. So if somebody says, oh, Michael, do you believe in metaphysics? I go, yeah, as long as you're talking about it from a phenomenological, Schopenhauerian point of view, I believe in metaphysics is right here. It's nothing supernatural or even super sensible. It's something that goes on within you every day, but it's a dialogue that we're not paying any attention to. The gates of the underworld, the crow sits right there at the gate of the underworld of Virgo as the sun is reaching down and moving into the underworld. Well, the underworld is nothing more than your inner being, where the whole work of metaphysics, memory, reflection, anamnesis, is carried out.
You made me think of that movie, The Crow, actually, with Brandon Lee. It was a favorite of mine back in the day, and I remember the whole point was that this crow carried him from the underworld back to the real world, and he was able to enact his vengeance or correct what was wrong or whatever. But if you look at that whole movie, metaphorically to based on what you're talking about how this is a process of you getting rid of your own demons and the trauma that you've maybe allowed to poison your own mind in a way and not deal with and not confront. That's why, you know, the Brandon Lee character takes on the role of the warrior in that theme, and he has to take on the most evil villains possible that robbed him of his life and of everything that mattered to him. And it was this whole spirit of the crow that a lot brought him back. And then when he got everything, you know, fixed up, he was able to go back and rest in peace. And so again, if you think of it metaphorically, it's quite striking. And
it is too, because 2 cards from now we'll be dealing with justice. Justice is another one of the cards that sits on this very, part of the zodiac we're talking about, where the underworld begins, and there's a need for rectitude and rightness and rectification. There's a need for rectification in people's lives, but we're going about it in a very haphazard way. Violence, evil is often a inappropriate way for people who've been harmed, and for people who feel that injustice has been done. They go about a wrong way to, rectify that, and not realizing that there's other more clever and sensible ways. I understand what they're doing. You know, Hegel understood what they're doing. He understood that evil is inevitable down through the ages until man discovers much more holistic ways, you see, for getting rectification and what he wants. And we're still pretty naive, about how to do that. But one more thing about memory I forgot to mention, and it's a little bit more mundane, but all the more practical for people listening, and that is this preconscious reservoir is also known by another name, and that's history. We're so used to saying the word history, we forget what it actually is. It's one of the manifestations of this preconscious reservoir of being that Schelling and a few other philosophers were talking about. And a good concrete example is if you buy a child a musical instrument, what have you just done? Well, given that you bought them a piano or a keyboard, well, haven't you brought Mozart into the house? Haven't you brought Chopin into the house? Haven't you brought Beethoven and Scarlatti into the house? And Monteverdi, or I don't know who else, right? You have just brought in, I suppose if somebody bought your guitar, you're bringing in, well, who could be say, Segovia, a Julian Bream or whatever, and so on. So whatever instrument you buy, if you're buying a set of paints, you're bringing in that history. So that's what I mean. So much of our life, something we may do purely for the joy of it, purely for its cultural stimulation, you are then immediately you're accessing that reservoir, that anamnesis, because you have to now learn, you have to go over the ground of the greats. You're not doing it slavishly, because you're the individual. Your individual will is working with that instrument. And it will never be that 100% of it is just recapitulation. That's not what I'm saying. A good deal of it will be, because you have to, because the way has been trodden before you. Somebody even made that piano before you. You know what I mean? So a lot of it will be recapitulation. But you know what you're meant to do about that? Get on your frickin' knees and pray in gratitude that there was a prehistory. That's made you who you are. You should be in debt, whether you like it or not, to all those artists and musicians and poets and painters and performers and dancers and playwrights and all of it, and even the industrialists and inventors. So yeah, a lot of it will be going over the ground, but you're meant to do that not slavishly. You're meant to do that with gratitude, and hopefully your teachers. This is often not the case, but often your teacher, like you turn around and go, "Hey, teacher, you got that guy on the wall." If you're a martial arts dojo and you see a picture of an old geezer, right? What's he doing up there? Well, one day you'll find out, because you didn't invent it all. Okay, punk, get in line.
Right.
So yeah, get on your knees and do it gladly. There's a certain amount of humility that's needed. And then from that, once you've really got that humility, you know what's going to happen? Something absolutely remarkable, something absolutely idiosyncratic, or as we say, ideographic, something utterly individualistic comes out of you. But it will only come out of you and be rational and sane if you've had that gratitude to the masters before. All the masters wanted you to surpass them, by the way. They didn't want to be masters. The greatest master is meant to be surpassed by his disciple.
Absolutely.
But there's a certain method of doing that. You can't do that ungratefully and ungratefully like so many times it's been done.
Yeah.
But then the next result, you see, the next part is that individualness that comes out. So again, in our daily lives, just the simple act of introducing a child to painting or to poetry or to music, you are indeed tapping into, or even literature for that matter, reading the great novelists or whatever it might be, then you are indeed already tapping into history. or more correctly, into that preconscious reservoir of knowledge upon which we all stand.
Yeah, that's important to point out to people, to have that respect for those that have come before and have built everything, previously that we now can bring forward in our time, and then hopefully reinvent. But you can't reinvent something like even Bruce Lee, who was often hated back in the day by traditional martial arts circles because he was reinventing he was bringing it out in his own way, and he was talking about, hey, we don't have to have any fixed patterns anymore, we don't have to do it the old way anymore, we can expand out of that, and we can evolve this thing. And a lot of the traditionalists were very threatened by that. But really, when you read Bruce Lee's writings, he paid a lot of debt of gratitude to his instructors and the people that built the arts that he was studying from. He was just one of the first eclectic martial artists. He was out there not just paying homage to one guy from one discipline. He was out there seeking out the greats of all disciplines and trying to then formulate his own and become a great himself. And I think that that's a much more, I guess, holistic process in general, whether it's martial arts or music or just your everyday life. You have to, pay that respect where it's due, that foundation that's been laid, and then we can take it forward and we can advance it and we can put our own unique touch on it. And that's really what the joy is in art. I mean, you can't really be inspired by art unless you first saw a piece of art by a great master. You go look at a Leonardo da Vinci or any of these great paintings. And, I had the honor of going up and checking out Alex Gray's art museum there, and just looking at the amount of work and detail and intricacy and the flair and the passion behind it inspires something in you. And then you take from that and you go, okay, well, I want to feel that as well. I want to be able to manifest something and create something myself. But I wouldn't be able to do that. I wouldn't have had the inspiration to do that in the first place had I not gone to a master, had I not seen somebody do it in its most pure form.
Exactly. And when you meet those kinds of people, or even if you meet them even through books or encyclopedias, and all that kind of thing, you're meeting genius, the concept genius. Yeah, you're meeting individual stereotypical geniuses, right? Embodiments of genius. But what's really happening is that you're meeting genius. You're meeting the concept. So that means that you've opened your mind. You say that people can be geniuses in mind, people can be geniuses in body, people can be geniuses in all of the above. They can be artistic, sports, whatever it might be. And so you're meeting that concept, and that is what your parents should be, or when I say parents, I mean culture in general, because of course it's unrealistic to imagine that every parent is going to be able to take on that task. But the culture should then do. If the parent isn't there or the parent's inadequate, then the culture, the school, the friends and the other neighbors and relatives, these are people, this is our culture. But if that culture has become monotone, right, anemic, like the design of most American cities where, movement is rendered an illusion because everyone looks the same as everywhere else. If this kind of thing is happening, this communization of our space, our ambiance, and nothing is unique, nothing stands out, nothing shows genius anymore, it's entirely banal. Well, how on earth is a child then going to be anything but banal? They never get to encounter genius, and when they do, it's usually something that's looking down its nose, something that's, like we said in the Hermit, up there on Mount Olympus, looking down at you, and and telling you to be part of a hierarchy. And then the damage is done from that moment on. So then can you blame the people who enter into those hierarchies? Because as I said, if you're not going to get 3 stripes, you'll be satisfied with 1. And this is accounts for then why the police are the police and the doctors are the doctors, because poor people that they are, they've had to merge in with that hierarchy because they know nothing else. And they say, well, then if I can't be the top, then at least I'll have a few people under me, and that accounts for every little potentate, every little demagogue, every little punk at work, little manager or executive or CEO, all of it. And I don't care where you go, churches, schools, sport clubs, this is endemic, isn't it? Have anybody ever stopped? Like we've been hinting all the way through the Path of the Fool, does anybody actually stop one day and look at it all and just see how many authority figures and slaves and masters that there are and what can be done about that and get passionate about doing something about it? So again, this is what needs to be. And again, if you don't have a culture, the danger is that evil then reigns supreme. You have the regression of the teens because they are no longer animated or inspired, then they're regressive. As we said, they want to go back to that, how did I explain it before? It was the great sleep or the protracted infancy. Some people do go over the edge and actually do die or completely stop. Others, it's just they may be 50, but they've just experienced a prolonged, protracted infancy, which is simply regressive. They can't face reality, so the mind invents 101 ways of returning to this sort of stasis. They're not willing to progress. They do, in their own way, deny the body. And this can be the drug culture, of which we've said so much. It can be the immersion in some boogaloo Eastern religion, and there's plenty in the West anyway, so, it's one thing or the other. Or again, some, like Ayn Rand pointed out, it doesn't even have to be religious. It can be just some collectivism. Right here in the West, right there at the end of your street, they can be doing it. Right light of the Western world could be regressing into the big communitarian Quatermass and the pit, clustering and collectivism. I don't think for myself. I don't even know what that means. I'll wait till everybody, I'll wait till I'm told what to think. This kind of thing creeping in more and more by every year passes by, until the free-thinking man is just absolutely extinct. And this is where we're heading. So it's very, very, very dangerous. And all of this New Ageism and a lot of this Eastern Gnostic stuff, doesn't help. So we have to keep on doing our work, to keep people as rational as we can, and as deconstructive right across the board, and that includes in science as well, because science has done tremendous damage to help collectivize people. Science is one of the things, not just religion, that's helped us disconnect from our body. Science offers no help to you if you want to do shadow work, which, as again repeat, is Reichian. It is bodily. Well, science doesn't have an interest in that. Science is just say, take this pill, mate. You'll feel all calm all over. You'll be able to sleep at night. They're not going to ask you why you've got insomnia or what's going on. They're not going to help with your parasympathetic system. The parasympathetic is the system that helps you calm down. But if it's disconnected, it's like two cogs, right, that have become disconnected. The parasympathetic was the big wheel that helped us slow down the racing mind. People experience what I'm talking about as insomnia or racing mind, or inability to sit still, inability to get on top of their problems. They're troubleshooting their problems all the time. All of that mental frontal lobe activity, right? Well, underneath that sits this incredible machinery called the parasympathetic system that when you're born, or let's just say if you're not traumatized, they're working together. So that when the upper part of you goes all histrionic and crazy, the parasympathetic, it's like a big engine, that moves upwards and connects. It clicks in with the cogs above and slows them down, right? But if you've been traumatized, then the system is banjaxed. And just like a machine has spun out of control and disconnected, the parasympathetic is disconnected from the sympathetic. And, it's like you can imagine it falling below, falling down into the abyss. And so there's nothing to stop the whirring systems above, and this accounts then for 101 of the cocktail of dysfunctions that people are experiencing. Now, it's a long-winded way of saying that when then you go to the doctor, oh my God, they're just going to make it worse. They're happy to see you coming. They love it because now they're going to give you cancer. They're going to make 10 things worse where one was actually relatively easily solved. So we need to, bypass these people. We need to deconstruct their model. We've got to understand what is going on and learn how to work with the body to say, hey, I know a way of restoring, these parasympathetic mechanisms so that I'm not spinning out of control and there's smoke bellowing out of all the systems until I break, until I either mentally or physically break. I'm not going to allow that happen to me. And of course, getting to nature, as we said originally, is a huge key part of that. But there are other Eastern, quote-unquote practices like Qigong and others that help you do that. And we need to bring these things into our life. We need to be doing the shadow work and not totally buying into the Jungian or the sort of pseudo-Jungian interpretation, because Wilhelm Reich is always there to point out the failings of both the Freudian and the Jungian system. I make this a very big part of my work. Went into it in the post-human world talk, went into it in this Path of the Fool. It's so essential that you get out of the head and that you stop thinking in these of shadow work, as something elusive. The underworld, journey or shadow work has been there for millennia. The ancient Egyptians talked about it. Every tradition talks about it, right? But if we don't interpret it correctly, if we don't know that it entails the body, it's very corporeal, well, then we're lost. We're just going to be thinking it is something to do with, abstract meditation or some other crazy mental apparatus, or lying down on a couch, perfectly still, talking to some, qualified urbanite in his little medical office with the fluorescent lights beaming down at you and the clock ticking away. This is meant to be shadow work, as the Deepak Chopras and others would like it. What a lot of shit. It's something so different than that. It's about listening to your body. It's about discovering those dissociated parts of your own body, and bringing them back, being conscious of them in whatever way that person feels that they're doing that. And again, that will help to alert and awaken the parasympathetic again, which is always working in normal people, but it's not working in traumatized people or even highly stressed people. Their homeostasis is broken. They may be running around not knowing how to do anything about it. They're experiencing this terrible kindling, which is a form of anxiety, which will then manifest itself in eating disorders and sugar addictions and excessive smoking and fidgetiness and, what did we say before, insomnia, things like that, which are becoming more and more prevalent. And then what's becoming more prevalent than that is, the pharmaceutical Leviathan telling you, we got 101 solutions for you. Just come over here and bite down on this stuff and you'll be wonderfully contented. And that is just DEFCON 1. Because as I pointed out so elaborately in the post-human world, now you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. You may be getting rid of a certain topical anxiety, but with it, you're throwing out the legitimate anxiety that is key to the rites of passage, key to your deeper sense of progress, and will completely banjax your connection to the tripartite thing we talked about, the Trinity, the existential Trinity. You can no longer function as a cultural entity, and you can no longer harmonize with nature because you're dead inside. So this is how these buggers want us. They're desperate, these evil arcs, to get us into that state, and they're succeeding. So
and we touched on that in the last series on the Red Papacy and really trying to dissect what's going on in the world right now in this whole refrain of trauma. And you've even got the Pope coming out now, and he's very depressed about what's happening in the world, and he's even got these comments about how I guess we'll celebrate Christmas, but it's not really going to be all that, it's because of all this horrific stuff going on in the world that behind the scenes those guys are actually perpetrating and continuing on. So it's funny how the trauma gets put out there, and then you got Big Daddy character coming out to tell everybody, well, you should be depressed, you should be worried, and in a sense, obviously we have to deal with these things, but it's just interesting how this game gets played psychologically with people and the way it gets interpreted through the media, and then everybody's out there and they're all just walking around like a bunch of manic depressives as opposed to inspired, motivated people to bring about positive change. And a lot of the people I speak to on a regular basis in my work, they suffer from one level of depression or another. One level of depression, one level of anxiety. They're either on some kind of medication or they're not, and they're just losing their shit on a regular basis. They don't know who to turn to. They're confused now with all this information being online. Everybody out there is trying to find answers, but there's counter arguments to every goddamn thing you can find. So people they have no inner sense of how to decipher what's true from what's not. So it creates a feeling of depression, which ultimately leads to sort of a meaninglessness of life. Life, whatever, just got to get through it. Life's a bitch and then you die kind of attitude. When all that really needs to happen in the individual that's going through that is to shift the way they think, the way they think about what's happening. They often like to feel, I guess people gravitate towards feeling like a victim in all of this. But the truth is you were never a victim. You made yourself into a victim, and we're trying to inspire people to go on this journey so that they can mitigate those issues themselves, and they don't have to turn to these medical institutions or these pharmaceutical drugs or getting desensitized by the media or whatever.
Yeah, one way I put it in the program is that, we have one life to live and infinite things to know, the sort of variant of what you're talking about. And then I whittled it down finally in this program. I had to wait for like 4 programs to give this little nub. And that is, since that is obviously impossible, then all we need to focus on is the essentials. We agree then that there's certain essentials, that those are the things we must know, and we will certainly have lived a meaningless life unless we do know them, right? So the focus is to know the few essentials. And these Leviathans that you're talking about, they don't want us to do that. They want us to be overwhelmed. They want us to be in constant comparison with some celebrities or some other, wealthier people or whatever it might be, thinking that the world is going past us and we're not connecting. As I said, we don't have the time to either pick up the ideas or even mull over them. And this can all make people very, very depressed. And that's also because they have a wrong relationship with depression. Depression is actually a really good thing, actually, as are all the negative emotions. But again, we've been mistaught by these people to look at it differently. When people have this sense of meaninglessness, I do this a lot of my astrological work when I see clients, for readings and what have you, they're often in this state, just like you're describing the people that you know. And I just say to them simply that meaninglessness that you're talking about is not really about what you're doing. It's more about the way that you've been doing it. There is only a few, when it really comes to the what, there's only really, there are only a certain amount of whats. There's only a certain amount of whats, but there's a lot of different ways. And so what we have to realize is that the what that we do in life, they're pretty basic. We are human, we raise families, we, play, we have fun, we eat, we dream, we watch TV. The whats are pretty much standard. They don't change too much. Even on an internal metaphysical level, they're kind of similar. We all have similar memories. We often think of things in a very similar way and so on. So what the meaninglessness is actually verb related. It's very much an active thing, in which it's the way that we've been trained to do something. It's the way that we've been told to see. And this way of seeing, or this way of doing, is again an inheritance, you see, from the culture and from the parents. It's them who said, well, if you don't do this, if you don't do what we're telling you, you're going to end up in a bad state, or they tell a child, so what are you going to be when you grow up? They never ask you, how do you feel?
Yeah, exactly.
How are you now? What do I give a fuck about when I grow up? For God's sake, I'm here now. And plus, if you really know what life's all about, that's an endless beginning. There's no such things as deaths and endings and getting old. There's only a constant renewing of self. So when you know that, and when you know that everyone that you meet and everything that you see is in a constant process of renewal and beginning, even God, by the way, we'll leave that out. But if we wanted to go to the higher level, even God has no beginning. He's always in a state of beginning, as we are, as the cosmos is. If we were imbued with that, like the Schellings and Hegels wanted us to be, they wanted to teach this to children. They wanted us to be aware that we're in a constant state of renewal. Not only does that banish any concept of an ending or of a death, but it banishes any idea of what I'm going to be tomorrow and all the stress that comes with that. I'm having enough time just being what I am now. I'm in a perpetual state of immediacy. And I'm in a universe all around me that's doing exactly the same thing. I have enough on my plate to be conscious of that. Right? And I want to be immersed in that. I want to do that. When I'm listening to music, I want to hear in that music that very theme. When I'm looking at painting, I want to see in that painting that process, that the artist is aware of that. And I won't accept anything less. And when I'm talking to people, I want to have conversations about that. Or I would like to have silence, which is pregnant with that knowing that here we are all together, being who we are, and becoming moment by moment, renewing each person. So when parents are asking me, so what are you going to be when you grow up? Grow up? I don't even know what the concept means.
Yeah.
And so, as I say, it's the way, our parents and teachers have taught us this, our whole culture is into this. And no wonder you're meeting people who are bloody depressed. They've never been introduced to themselves or what they're all about. And so they haven't even lived. And halfway through their life, they're now wondering about going to die. Look at the kind of way we're living. They have no idea that there's a mythic journey under their own stereotypical life. They've become so desensitized they can't even see that. That's why they mock astrology and laugh. Horoscopes. Whoa. Well, do you know anything about it? Well, no. Well, then why don't you like it? Or why do you know anything about it? You know a lot about science, don't you? Yes, I believe in science. I'm very scientific. Uh-huh. And what does that mean? That you believe a bunch of crap that's been taught to you by some of the most evil people on this planet? Stuff you've never gone out to prove yourself, and if you did, you'd find the opposite of what those bastards have told you? But now you're an expert knowing that astrology is no good? You have no clue about who you are, how your life works, or the mythic journey that's going on between your boring, banal, empty, sense-infatuated life, but you know that astrology has no meaning, when it's the very thing that we chart your rites of passage and know if you've passed them or failed them. You see what I'm saying? We're living in this delinquent society that has opinions about everything, and then they're sitting there depressed, ready to go to the first guy in a white coat and suck their deathly pills that shut down the whole system. They're not activating your parasympathetic system, they're shutting down the sympathetic system. So nothing's moving. Except the smile on the face, which is from ear to ear, go, I feel fine. Everything's just tickety-boo. I'm on a cloud. Just nothing disturbs me. And only everyone around them knows, oh my God, what has happened to this person, you see?
It's an illusion, yeah.
Frickin' hell. But nothing's moving. They don't want any vital juices, either internally or culturally, to be moving. And what people have got to understand is that you can do that. You can deaden the culture. You can de-civilize it. We've talked in other shows about how even the immigration plays into all of this. But it's not just that. There's loads and loads of other ways that cultural juices are frozen. And Hegel and these people were begging you to not let it happen, to stay rational, to understand why you even create cultures. He wasn't talking about draconian, authoritarian, totalitarian states. He was talking about a consensus, a deep, rational understanding of why we even have culture, why people want to live together. That you're part of the spirit, you're part of the logos, you're part of the Geist, you're part of the will that's always an everlasting movement, and you're part of that everlasting movement. And when you realize that all of that movement is will and will is free, then you don't inhibit the freedom of other people. You get out of their way, and that is what we call moral law. Moral law is the ability to set boundaries and limits so that I can exercise my will and you can exercise your will, but we have to be very, very rational to maintain, not only to create that system, but to maintain it. Because it does need to be maintained, otherwise foreign elements come in to stop it, right? So all Hegel's entire life career was just about that. How do you create a culture in which every one of those people is aware that they're participating in the life of the Geist? And when they are aware of that, they're completely transformed. They become what he called rational beings. If one wants to use other words, fine and dandy, but he just liked to use the word rational in its highest and purest way. And when each person is then letting room for other people to be who they are, because each and every one knows what they're doing, they have to be conscious of that fact. But as I said, the institutions that teach us today are anti-Hegelian. They don't want you to know this. They want you to think it's dog eat dog, or it's positivistic, or it's slavish religion under one God, under Allah, or under Jehovah, under whatever they got, they'll hand you, they'll do it. Or it's under some other, authoritarian, truly authoritarian pattern, or it's nothing. It's just one big Dionysian party till you drop. We're just going to hand you more drugs, more rock and roll, more bullshit, so you can just veg out. Is this what we call culture today? What happened to morality? What happened to the undergirding, the philosophy of culture, the understanding of the historical process, the understanding that each person is a caretaker of their culture and also a contributor to that culture, and in that lies your meaning. We'll see bit by bit by bit, all of this is being completely eradicated. And then they were just going to be completely meaningless, docile bodies waiting for the next extravaganza, to turn us all on. And then funding an industry that is extremely adept at making that possible.
It's a really good note that you have here about the concept of evil to follow that up with, of when we're acting without concern for the will of others,
Mm-hmm.
become self-centered in that sense, and not self-centered in the true sense, but say egocentric, right? And then we become all that matters, and we end up abusing freedom, and we end up abusing the will because we're abusing the will of others. Did you want to expand on that?
Yeah, because remember, a lot of times people think that an evil man is a very individualistic man. I think everyone listening to what we're saying here has that fallacy in their head. Evil is just some little Anton LaVey, rebel who doesn't like Christianity, and he's going to wear what he wants, and he's drive as fast as he can, and he gives a finger to the system. This is not true. Evil men are collectivists. Wherever an evil man is to be found, he'll have a crowd. He'll have an audience.
Right.
It's like a hermit when we said he comes down as the son of Horizon. Remember that?
Yep.
Either he comes around saying, I don't want anything to do with you people, don't ask me, carry on with what you're doing. I know that you'll learn through your mistakes. But most times he comes down as a son of Horizon with loads and loads of protractors and compasses and hammers and chisels, and let's fix everything that's wrong. And then he goes about doing that. And one thing he's doing is kind of okay in a way, he's setting limits. But where it becomes evil is that those limits exist for themselves. They're not limits of what's inside, which is freedom. they're limits to hold freedom, you know, in which one person imposes the limit on another person. Basically, we're talking about hierarchy, which our culture is full of, right? And that's when it becomes sort of malignant. That's what Blake called ratio or reason. He used the word reason completely differently than Hegel did. You know, we shouldn't ever confuse the two. For Blake, reason was the necessary part of us that does set these limits and observes them. Reason, if you didn't have reason, you wouldn't know where the limits are. You'd be kind of autistic. But when you have reason, you know where the limits are. But when reason hardens, when reason becomes malignant, then it's only focused on those limits, and it's only focused on those measurements, and it's only focused on those dimensions. And the freedom gets subverted, and the line, the limit, is exalted, right? So that's a form of evil to William Blake. You're quite right. Other forms of evil are related to that, you know, where one person tries to dominate, where he's setting the limits. He sets himself up as a setting of it, which is what your politicians are basically doing. And another kind of evil that I think we did bring out in the Hermit is the idea that there's this regressive urge to go back to it's another misuse of history, and that is saying, yeah, you know, Michael, you're right. I don't like the culture that we have right now, so I prefer to, you know, regress. So I'm going to go back and live in a commune somewhere in India, or I'm going to, you know, start thinking about, you know, something that happened in the Middle Ages or something. You know, there's all sorts of different ways that people regress in their political and cultural aspirations, right? Or even, as I said, through the drug culture, thinking they're going to live in a tree in the Amazon or something like that, or what it might be, you know, and they sort of bow out. But that's a form of evil, because that constitutes not a progress or a contribution to culture, but it's a kind of a return to the primordial part of this pre-conscious reservoir, not in a good way, but actually a diving into it. This is what nirvana is all about. This is what all of these false paths are all about. You know, I could talk about it endlessly, but let's just keep it brief and just say that this regressive urge, you know, is bad too. That's a form of evil as well. And we have to understand that the evil man, you see, as I said, is often a collectivist. He's not an individualist. It's tremendous importantly to notice that. Remember, the individual is basically someone who wants to find, remember we talked about that vocation shift?
Right. From
occupation and recreation into vocation. Well, that's what he wants to do. He doesn't want to do it for a crowd. He knows he can't. But see, the dictator or the evil man does. He thinks he can steer a whole group of people. This is lunacy, this is. You know, he thinks that, you know, it's like droplets of mercury. If he just moves the table, all the mercury will come together in a big puddle. Well, that's exactly right. It will do, and all you got is a big puddle. There's no individualism there. The individual is saying, no, I want to awaken what it is within me that's vocational, and then I know that when I'm really good at my vocation, that might be a good inspiration for other people. But I'm not trying to do it as a collective movement.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to give people inspiration to work with their culture, to shake off this feeling of depression, to realize they've got a tremendous duty already ontologically, and also giving them the moral ability to realize that you do not violate the will of other people. You know, and this is more deep than we're talking about at this point. You know, how that happens, why you shouldn't violate the will of other people, and should use your reason to notice where those parameters are. That's what culture is. So Hegel was really talking nothing more about that. Of course, he had ideas about how art can help with that and music can help with that. He wrote endlessly on aesthetics and all of that, and it's all very interesting. But he basically was just simply saying, we need to get this culture together. We need to be rationally aware that we are embodiments of the Logos and the Geist. And when we are, only then do we have the underlying template for all people to do all things the same way. He wasn't speaking about a dry, Orwellian, grey, you know, civilization or culture. Not at all. He said each individual is imbued with the Geist, and that Geist is not a small thing. That will that's moving through individuals will help to create individuals more. It will help to show that individual what his true vocation is. He left that to the Geist. He didn't say, I'm going to teach you how to do that. But people misinterpreted him and thought, oh, he's just talking about a draconian, slavish, you know, master-slave type relation. No, absolute opposite. He was saying that once you live in a culture that is working this way organically, each person, like a cell in a body, is doing what it needs to be doing, and it's doing it completely, right? And it's not there's no concept of oneness here. How can there be oneness in a body where there's billions and billions of cells all doing their... It's a wholeness, it's an allness. but it's a very holistic kind of thing, you see. And then the other greater evil, since we're on the subject of evil, then we have the Blakean evil, which was shared by Hegel and shared by Schelling and others, which is the devilish thing that we all do, which is positioning God's entities, heavens, above the human station. This is probably, arguably, one of the worst causes of what we know to be evil. It's also one of the least known. It takes a Blake to explain it. We're not often thinking about it because our culture, being malignant, brings up children to believe that God's in his heaven, and we've got the hell, all the evil people below. Yeah, they're below, all right, but they're morally below. It's nothing to do with supernatural realms. And so the idea that you have these supernatural, super sensible worlds is one of the greatest causes of evil, because then man has positioned himself, and he's viewing himself as an underling, as base, as wicked. Religion has helped with this. And then, of course,
focusing on a disembodied reality as opposed to the actual life and the reality that's before you, right? Like it's getting your mind in the wrong spot.
Yeah, and then when you've done that, what's the inevitable cause? Well, it's the inevitable cause is if you're living in any hierarchy where you've got people barking at you from above, you're going to feel lesser. You're going to feel incompetent. Like in the military or whatever, you're going to feel completely base, and then you'll act that way. And I've said in my work time and time again, yeah, it's easy to see how we act externally in this malignant way. I think most of us know that. But see, people forget that the first person to whom we act immorally towards or sadistically towards is the self. Now, this is not known. This is a big blind spot in the world. We act, because of these religions or because of this positing of a higher realm, we ourselves cringe. This is what Nietzsche was talking about. We ourselves are abased. We ourselves are on our knees. Even if we have a morality, it's a terribly draconian, enforced, and horrible, narrow morality. It's not the morality of conscience. It's not the morality of man who's understood from nature how to do a thing, how to build a thing, how to be. No, that's all been thrown out. We're urbanized now. We live entirely under fluorescent lights and in walls, both glass, concrete, and steel. What the hell? We never know nature, what anything about it. There's some frightening theme park. It's some hideous nuisance. Nature, shit, what do we want to do with that? Yeah, so we don't learn from the birds like the ancient Egyptians learned from the animals and the song of the animals at night, and how that song changes through the seasons. When you wake up in the morning, if you did as a Native American Indian, the first animal you saw was the totem of the day. What the hell? We're fucking worried about that shit. No, we're worried about the first phone call and the first tweet and the first text with some neurotic idiot on a cell phone at 9 a.m. in the morning going, how's your day? Kisses, smooches, happy Christmas. Fuck you, right? Fuck it. Right? I'm worried about the snowflakes outside and the birds and what they're doing and the rainbows and the cloud passing and all of that. I'm trying to find that patch of greenery. I don't need you to be tweeting me every 10 seconds and telling me, about how sick your cat is and all the rest of it, and how your neighbor's dog is been pissing all over your fucking front yard. I don't need to know all that shit. Let me look for that patch of green. Let me look for the water and how it's moving. Let me say hello to the day. There's so many other things I need to be attending to. There's so many questions I need to be looking at. I'm doing a lot for my culture, but I need to take care of myself as well. These are big things. And then, since we're on the subject of God, the idea is that it doesn't mean that just because you won't put a religious God above your head, that's what we've been talking about. That doesn't mean that there isn't some spirit, some universal animating spirit. Hey, there very well could be, but you're not going to find it. You're not going to touch it as long as you buy the other. See, this is a very, very strict situation. If you buy into the false, you can never know the truth. That's why I said earlier on, it's about apophatic. It's about deconstruction. Until you first deconstructed the lie, there is no chance in hell that the truth is ever going to come to you, because you can't have both at the same time. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You have to be naked. You've got to be only then will the other present itself to you. That animating force. Like I said, it's part of your it's part of the Eigenwelt. And you can think of it as a Geist, as Hegel did, or you can think of it as a spirit or a will or whatever you want to talk about. But you're never going to know anything accurate about it when your mind is all poisoned by these lies that these religious bastards have been putting out. We dealt with this at length at the Lover's card, and we'll continue to do so. We looked at a few aspects of it here in the Hermit card. especially Schelling's idea that God has his own unconscious. I mean, how heavy is that, for Christ's sake? You're going to need time to digest that, not just know about that subject. That's something that takes a lifetime of thought, what the man said, that God may have sit upon his own pre-conscious history and may know as little about it as we know about ours. Jesus, what the hell do we make of that? Well, you know, one thing we can make of it is we now understand why science can't find origins, why science, for all its preposterous hyperbole, thought it could look into the origins of things, right? Be it the galaxy or God's origin. Well, you can't do it. Well, of course, because Schelling was laughing at you. He knew you couldn't do it, because God is in an ever state of beginning. And God may even have his own hidden beginnings that even he doesn't know about. And if God didn't know about it, how the hell is Stephen Hawking going to know about it? Right. It's impossible to know about it. So then if it's impossible to know about it, then we have moved forward. We now know something incredible. And then we get on with what we do know about. You see, these things are not causes for pessimism. These are causes for some understanding our own ground and our own reasons for progress. Progress itself always needs a reason. And we know that we're wrong to place gods above us, because that will occlude our own will, and that will occlude a true understanding of what the real spirit of life is all about, given that there is one. Right? We know that, so it's a fact, so we stop doing it, don't we? But then if you also probe deeply and you say, all human beings are part of the will, they're part of spirit, but we have an ancestry and a history that we can't possibly tap. We can't know it to its origins. So wait a minute, as Schelling said, maybe God is in the same predicament. It doesn't hinder God, it makes God what he is. It's ontological, it's part of God's nature. That his own origins, in other words, to make it very clear for people, God has his own unconscious as we have an unconscious. And so this is one of the things we share with God. Doesn't that require thought? Doesn't that change the whole history of religion? Well, now you know why Schelling isn't taught, and why a bunch of other bozos were made into huge towering figures of philosophy. Some of them had interesting things to say, I'm not saying that. But the German idealistic and romantic tradition was occluded and blocked and misinterpreted grossly. And a lot of other people, you know, were put up there who probably don't even really deserve it. Well, you want to know why? Exactly the things we're talking about now. They did not want people to step out of religion. They didn't want people to re-envision God. They didn't want the people to understand what the unconscious might be, you know, and all of the things we're talking about. That was a tradition that they hated on sight and they had to get rid of. It's not the only tradition, but it's one of the most important traditions in philosophy and religion, you know. So that's why I did my particular website on Schelling, to try to hopefully bring back these ideas, because it's not highfalutin philosophy. It is of the deepest impact for people if they want to not only create a decent culture, you know, with their fellows in the world, which is a good thing to want, but also if they want to have the mental hygiene, the intellectual pristine clarity that the Hermit card is telling you that you need. You know the limits of knowledge, you know the limits of reason, but you also know that within those limits there's a great deal that we can know. And this is the true project of life. This is, you know, central to the path of the Fool, where we're going and what we've been doing through the series.
Now, the symbol of the card obviously is that the Hermit has reached the mountain peak. And so when we've talked about this before, we brushed up on it in the Female Illuminati, talking about the mountain as a goddess symbol. How does that really relate to the Hermit and this whole process and what that symbolism is expressing in the tarot card? Well,
you see, there's several ways. I was going to wait till I did the Libra card justice to get into this, but we can talk about it a little bit now. One way is just simply the night sky is itself the goddess symbol. So you couldn't have astrology, you couldn't have the movement of the sun. So even before the sun goes into the underworld, you know, into the feminine signs, it's already in the sky, and the sky is the feminine symbol. We went into that in great detail in the Female Illuminati, as you said. That's a mountain. That the sky, night sky, is a goddess symbol. The mountain is because the mountain reaches up to the sky. So it's the precinct not upon which the male is exalted, unless he is a priest serving the goddess, then he's allowed up there. So all ziggurats were, all pyramids are goddess symbols. Remember all the we took about an hour and a half to go into that, you know, in the Female Illuminati.
Right, yeah.
Including the dollar bill pyramid and all of that, so many others. But as I said, as I was coming towards the Justice card, I was going to get into the real reason, and that is that the Western signs of the zodiac are known as female, for the very simple reason that Aries and Taurus are very masculine, obviously. So if you look at it like the zodiac as a mirror, then Virgo, Libra, and to a degree Scorpio are feminine to that degree, because they face these they face the eastern horizon, where the sun, or Horus, rises in his state of champion as the young, virile, fool character, raging and ram-like. And then these quieter, cooler, more contemplative signs that face it on the western horizon. Delilah, and all the myths that have the female or the femme fatale encountering the hero, and then he has to sort of go into another mode. I mean, even Tiresias ends up dressing like a woman. I mean, they have it right there in the Greek myths that in order to go into his underworld cycle, he had his eye put out. There's a symbol of the sun losing its power, like Samson losing his hair or whatever, or some other Fisher King symbolism where there's a wounding. And then that describes a feminization of the hero, in which he now has to go within, into this metaphysical realm. It's nothing more than that. He goes within. In other words, he's not running around in the external world anymore, conquering and bashing knights over the head and, doing all the heroic things, jousting and producing and all the rest of it. He's now going into a different mode. And that's what the Hangman, which is a scorpionic card. All of these cards that are coming up talk about that. And so that's what it's really all about. That's where this mountain, it's a little bit, it's one of those cunning plays, one of those cunning metaphors that work both ways. It looks like it's a masculine symbol, but it's not. It's a cervix. In its own way, it's a symbol of getting above, so that you can not only clearly see where you're going, but that you realize also from where you've come. Because the journey in which you're going doesn't have a light. The underworld does not have a light. And when it doesn't have a light, that means that, you have to turn on other senses. We have those senses. And martial arts, and we can do many other things. Yoga essentially was about turning on those senses. Some people already have them more developed than others, that's true. But basically everyone has the ability to turn on those senses. So the underworld experience is basically that. And it has its own sort of laws and regulations. But that's what it means to be feminine. It's not anything to do with females. Females can be as masculine as male-like as others. So it's really something quite different. And it's about turning within that metaphysical realm, in which at the same time you're quite high, even though it's going under. Yeah, but the going under, in some strange paradoxical way, is actually a going above, because you have a visual, you have a clarity of vision that they wanted to describe as being on the high place. But paradoxically, it's really about going deep into the roots. And of course, this makes sense from other stuff that I've spoken about previously, where in Wilhelm Reich's scheme, I think I did talk about it in the Hermit, where up is actually towards the surface of the body, right? And down isn't really down at all. It's more inward towards the core. So that's what it is. It's not so much about ups and downs. These are used metaphorically, but they can be very confusing. So it's better. We should develop better metaphors. Deeper and shallower, pure and impure. That kind of thing, because it's actually more accurate. And we are an ebb and flow. During the day, we're out there and we in the ego world, which is facing the world. But there's another part of us where we go in within. And you can use the terms masculine and feminine for that if you want. So the female god, let's take the Vedic tradition. I mean, you can do it with other traditions as well. But when they're talking about the goddesses, where it's Sarasvati or somebody else, Shakti, they're talking about the inner world. When they're talking about a god, they're more talking about the outer world, So it's just a kind of general rule. But even the idea of a progress across the sky is time, isn't it? It's the movement of celestial time, zodiacal time, solar and lunar time. Well, it's interesting that always the goddesses, it's in goddess traditions that we learned about time. For the Babylonians and Sumerians, it was Inanna. She was the teacher of time, actually. Sarasvati was in the Hindu tradition the keeper of the secrets of the calendar. In Greek it was Athena, and even the fates, the four fates, they're all female, and they are the fates that deal with fate, time, and death. And there's 4 female goddesses. So this has to be brought out. So even though they showed a male figure in the card, it's just one of the idiosyncrasies of the tarot. But there's really, from an astrological point of view, you're dealing with feminine archetypes. The Virgo is a female, and one of the most important stars within Virgo, if not the most important star in the whole heavens, is in Virgo. It's called Spica, and that has always been connected to the goddess, of the harvest and the goddess of the earth. So there's loads and loads of goddess symbolism there, because those Virgo and Libra are literally the gateways into the underworld. It's basically what, I'll go into it more when we get to other cards, but yeah, that's what I can say about it for now.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. When you go back and look at all these traditions and see these correlations, and you realize that the one thing that did connect everybody was the observation of the movement of the stars and the constellations, and how that correlated with consciousness and the movement of sort of the inner zodiac. And when you bring all that out, it really clears up a lot of misunderstanding that we see in religion, and that we see in even modern mysticism and spirituality or whatever. And hopefully also science. I mean, even you were talking about science, and we've spoken about this before, that there is a role for the scientific world, being that it's something that's measuring the materialistic realm and bringing about these different technological aids and things like that. And that can be either malignant or it can be a positive thing. And it's the same all around. I mean, each aspect has its role. We need an analyzation externally. We need some kind of scientific process. Then we also need that inner world, which would be like spirituality and religion, but we need that to be cleared up, and definitely the journey of the self and whatnot, and the connection to the natural world. So really it comes back to where we started, where we're talking about balancing out these different spheres so that they're in the right place, doing the right role. When one of these roles becomes so it tries to encapsulate everything, which is what's happening in mainstream science, where they're trying to answer everything and just throw all the spiritual inner work out the window, then they themselves become just as malignant as any kind of religion would have when they went in the extreme in a different direction. So the idea here is to try to heal that and synthesize it better, so that each has its function, and we understand the differences between each one and how we balance out all those things.
Exactly, and we talked earlier about if a man is cut off from his cultural roots, his history, he has no chance of doing that. So the malignant forces are definitely doing that. They're helping people to be severed from their racial and cultural roots, to make those into Orwellian bad words, bad terms, and we're falling for it, and it's not just going to affect the culture, it affects individuals. Just like we said, most people today probably do think of their life as just empty and meaningless. They're not aware that it's the way that they've been doing things. They're not aware of the remedies. They're certainly not aware, like Joseph Campbell spoke about that, and Carl Jung did, as well, that there's a mythic level under this. And I'll be talking about that more when we get to the Wheel of Fortune, and talking about my forthcoming book that deals with that, taking the tarot down a step into people's personal charts and stuff like that, because that's what a chart is. A chart, right, is, because remember, time, there's a whole question of whether time itself is even cyclical, because our clocks, even the zodiac, the calendar, all makes it look like time, goes around in circles and recurs. But we've just been talking earlier about the will, which is an endlessly flowing process, which implies that it's sort of linear, or at least omnidirectional. It doesn't really tell us that something starts and then goes back on itself. So why did we create those rounds? Why did we create those cycles? And we did it for good reason. Because even though time itself is not particularly linear, not particularly cyclical, we need to, what we do is we reckon it that way for good reasons. We hypotheticalize it, because we have these things called rites of passage. They're mythical, they're mysterious, they're part of this pre-conscious knowing. But what the zodiac is, what a chart is, you see, is the ability to know what these rites of passages are. These are the moments of where we really mature, when we really know what's going on. Imagine for a moment, there are moments when you're walking and something bubbles up, you come to a pool or a fountain in which something's bubbling up there. That is a moment when the pre-conscious reservoir makes itself known and gives you a chalice and says, now is it time for you to sup on this or drink on this. There's a big mythical thing happening. And it may be seconds. Some people have described those moments that they've happened, they're almost out of time. Others say it lasted for years. And there's many of them. And some last long, some last short. Some are intense and agonizing, and others are ecstatic, right? And we need to have a kind of consciousness that accepts them all, like we said earlier about the inability to deal with the legitimate anxiety. So what a chart shows is when these kinds of rites of passages are going to come up, what you need to be wearing, so to speak, or doing, to make the best of it, and what kind of craziness you might do, which is kind of stupid, which we should warn you against, so that you know more about it. Hey, this rite of passage is going to coincide with the coming together of a relationship, or hey, it's going to come together with the ending of a relationship. So don't be throwing yourself or her out of the window. Get it? Right. Okay, move on. And then you start dealing with all of these many, many, many rites of passage, which are shown in the chart. Once you create this cycle out of it, they're called cycles, or whatever, the rites of passage. And so it doesn't really matter if you see them as being on a linear structure of time, or, as we prefer, somehow the human race has designed it where we have these recurring cycles. It's just interesting. There's nothing much you can do about it. It's all up to you to, it's just like looking at the pulse or the wave. People can look at whatever way they do. And so the zodiac and the tarot, those are the bona fide, age-old, sanctified by time. These are the ways that we look into how to get people back onto the track of their inner chronology, onto who they are. Remember we talked about in the Path of the Fool very briefly about Swala de Lubitsch and the whole idea that, look, we don't even, forget about time being linear or circular, we don't know if even we've devolved. Right? Even in our conversation now, we've been assuming that, when we talk about the pre-conscious stages of being, I know a lot of people listening are still thinking about some swamp, some still thinking in terms of some mud. Even God, we're all come out of this black. Anytime you mention unconscious, or anytime you mention, earlier states of consciousness, we're so contaminated with ideas. Swala de Lubitsch tried his best to say, well, there could be a chance that there hasn't been an ascent. It's really wrong to use these terms anyway, but since we have to use them, it may not have even been an ascent. It may have been a freaking descent from even pure, higher forms of consciousness. So again, there's another one of those ideas that it takes time to sit back and whoa, hold on, you just give me shelling, and now what the hell is this? Yeah, but what I say about that is, look, even if we are devolved beings, we still are coming from a pre-conscious reservoir. That doesn't change. All that changes is your perspective of it, right? You're still coming from a pre-conscious reservoir, which you can't get to grips with. So if it was an ascent, well, then you still have that history. And if it was a descent, you still have that history. So one way, really, it doesn't change. Now, if you look at the Hermit, he's, two paths came up, there's two paths up and down from the mountain. That's what we're talking about. So you can either see it as an ascent, or you can see it as some sort of descent. He's hit the mountain from above and he's about to go down further into the world, or he's ascended to it from below. It really doesn't matter. The mountain works as a symbol in a way, for both of those concepts. It doesn't really affect us at the end of the day because we're here where we are. And it doesn't change the fact that that pre-conscious reservoir exists, and there must be a semi-permeable membrane between us and that place. And that's what Blake called the imagination. Hegel maybe called it the Geist. Bergson called it the Elan Vital. I mean, the Logos, whatever and as I said before, it's not you so much speaking to it. It's about it speaking to you constantly, but you're deafened to it. And working with the shadow, working with the body is one of the best ways to open your antenna so that you can hear its voice more. Getting into nature, of course, knowing that you have a vocation that's not given to you by people, but it's given to you by culture. It's given to you by the will towards your culture. So get on with it. So you won't be depressed. You won't be feeling your life is meaningless. When you hear somebody like me say that, and you're able to say, yeah, I got it. That's right. I'm going to get on with that. It doesn't matter what people think or say. I understand that you're right. This is what I've been looking for my whole life. I meant to be an author. I meant to be a teacher. I meant to be a swimming instructor. I meant to be a ranger, a forest ranger. But I know why I'm doing it now. It's not just to pay the rent. It's not just to impress somebody. It's because I have to do this vocationally. See, when it's these small stones in the shoe that stop you climbing the mountain. You can't even get to the garden gate. Yet every single person has got ideas of being great and climbing the mountain and being the best, but they can't take the stone out of the shoe that stops them getting past the garden gate. My work is all about that. My work is just all about trying to get that stone out of your shoe, and the rest is yours. The world is yours. The world is absolutely yours, just like the Motorhead album says. The world is yours. Go and attain it. But to do that, you have to deconstruct all the things that prevent you from doing it. And really, it's not nature that's stopping you. It's not even half yourself. Within yourself is the desire to do it, isn't it? So what is it? It's culture. For the most part, the evils, the obstructions, the negations is cultural. And so you have to then listen to what Schelling and Hegel and these people are saying. You do have to contribute to your culture. You do. Because when you see what the evil is, the next thing is to do something about it. And so that's ontological. Nobody had to tell you that. Once you see it, I have evil thoughts within. I'm not a good person. I don't feel right. Hey, I think I'm even one of these people that they're talking about that's evil. Yeah. Do you know how precious it is to be evil? You think that was a crazy statement, right? Until you know what I'm talking about. Well, what does a good man got to worry about? He can sit on the park bench and feed the pigeons for all he matters. The salvation of the world is in the hands of the evil person. When you really know what you're looking at, when you really come to your senses. Because it is within him that he is experiencing what it means to be torn apart, having all sorts of evil feelings. And it is within his power. Whether he exercises it or not is a moot point. But it is within his power to locate and track the reasons why he feels that way. Now, granted, if he doesn't do it and he ends up in solitary confinement, right, or the world's worst serial killer, he's in the encyclopedia of, well, okay, that's the way he chose and that's the wrong way. But beside all of that, it is the man who is falling apart. It is the man who knows that something's wrong within his body politic, who's in the prime and perfect position because he's so intimately aware of what evil is, then in some sort of Dostoevsky, Kafka-esque way, he's coming to grips with what it is. I wouldn't go so far as to, say that you need to be like a Marquis de Sade, but somewhere in the middle. The man who is inclined to feel damaged within, that he feels that he doesn't care about others, and he knows that something's wrong. He bloody well does know that something's wrong, because he's the one tied up in knots about it. It takes a lot to go and commit the crimes that a lot of people do, right? So they're tied up in knots. But the thing that's good in that evil is that they know evil and they know that something's wrong. And therefore they're closer to be able to track its roots to the cause and end it. But we live in a culture where we don't help the evil people that way. We don't give them any paradigm. So then how are we any less evil? You see how it folds back on itself? The good man is not as good as the one-eyed Jack. The guy sitting on the park bench saying, it's got nothing to do with me, is actually in his own way tarnished. Because he hasn't helped the culture get to the point where if and when evil people, be they young children, who go about just pulling leaves off trees and stamping on animals and stamping on insects and just these little horrors and growing up to be even worse. But they don't live in a culture that's saying, if you feel this way and you know that something's wrong, here's what you need to be able to do. We rely on you to locate the source of this. And what I mean is the parents. What I mean is the culture. We need to provide a system by which the evil man can, in the more constructive moments of his life, and believe me, these do exist. They exist later after rehabilitation, after the damage is done, then they all regret it and say, yeah, well, I'm really changed now. Yeah, but we should be in there before that can happen. Not in some Orwellian way, but in a very benign way in which we say evil is a good thing. Because by having these problems within, and this is basically essentially what the Hegels of the world were talking about, that there is the problem. So stick with the problem. Stick in the venue of the problem. And then from the evil comes the greatest good. Because now you can discover the causes. And the causes are 9 times out of 10 cultural.
It's like when you're trying to heal your body from being sick. Like you have to go through that process of identifying that whatever's causing that illness and then flushing it out. And that's the hardest part. But if you just remain ignorant of it, and then you're going to be victim to it, and you won't be able to change that situation for the better. Exactly,
well said. Because the process then takes over. If you don't give the person the right tools in the early days when he's feeling that way, eventually he'll succumb. And unfortunately, the drives, or whatever you want to call them, the urges, there's nothing really inhibiting it. Well, there is something inhibiting it, but that's just a draconian police system, court system, and that doesn't really fix anybody because the damage is all way done. And then the person just into justification of what they've done, or they just try to milk the system in a cunning and manipulative way. We all know that that's evil, as we know. We don't have to be told. It's in the papers every day. But what we're talking about on a deeper level isn't in the papers every day, and it's a much more holistic system. And there were people and teachers who were onto this. And basically what it means is that you stay close to what is malignant, because then you can track it back to the cultural roots. It's like I have this quote that says, every fool can ask the big questions of philosophy, but only a philosopher can find the answers to them. So we've got to turn fools into philosophers. And that's our agenda for culture. And if there are people who don't feel right within, there is something going on deeply inside, there is self-sadism, then that self-sadism becomes sadism towards others or towards animals. We need to be able to constructively help those people to say, you have a great role in life. You have a great role. You are a walking laboratory. And we're not going to work with you phenomenologically to find out and deconstruct why you have these urges, why you feel this way, what's wrong with the world, why do you feel that you hate everything in the world, why does everything just stinks? And go, the whole process, get into it and find out. And my God, that will be so sanitizing. So our answers are in evil. Like I said before, evil contains within it the seeds of its own destruction, but it also contains something else within it, the seeds of greater creation. So these are the things that need to be taught to children, taught to ourselves. We learn these every day, so that even in us, even in good people, you have moments, don't you, when there's evil urges and all sorts of frustrations and what have you. We need to do the same thing inside. It's not just this black and white, like, oh, there's all the good people and these evil fuckers over there. No, each person has within them these particular urges and impulses and desires, and they're perfectly organic and they're perfectly natural, because those are the echoes of our culture, which is definitely malignant. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist to work that out. Our cultures are terribly, terribly malignant. They're producing malignant people by the day. But so they're creating malignant people. Right, that's the end of the scale, and you need to go to those people, and within their hands is the solution. Absolutely. It's not going to come from on high. It's not going to come from some supernatural force. It's not going to come from some wise Albert Einstein who's going to crack it, and it's all going to happen. It's all going to, everyone's just going to go, wow, gee, he banished evil from the world like some Pied Piper. No, it's going to come from within the evil person. Because evil is a particular thing. It's a very interesting thing to study. As I've said throughout my work, the only person who can bring the greatest good into the world is those who are fully conversant with the nature of evil. There is absolutely no other way. And so we need to be very close to the evil within us. Let's use a better word, the immorality within us, or the moments when we are not operating with, in light of the greater will, the supernal will, God's will, if you will. We're not working with that. We're out of sync with that. We want to know why. If there's a kink in the wire, there's a reason for that kink. Something's out. It's just as simple as that. And creative people know. If you're trying to tune an instrument, yeah, well, you're capable of doing it. You are capable. You have within you the ear to know what to be in tune is. The instrument didn't give you that. You're tuning the instrument. But the instrument is not the instrument telling you what the correct harmonization of all the notes is. You have that internally. That's part of your biology, let alone your mind. So we have a metaphysical, archetypal grasping of what truth is. If we didn't, it would be pointless. Then you would be living in what people claim that Hegel is saying, which is a draconian enforced order. Well, first, he wasn't saying that, and secondly, we're not living in that. We never will. Culture and civilization will always survive as long as we are, aware that we have an inner grasping of the logos. And so it's like, as I say, when you're tuning the instrument, you have an inner understanding what harmony is. So you can know that the C's and the D's are, I don't know how to explain it, but when they're all in harmony, you know it. You know when your body's moving and flowing, right, in martial arts or whatever, in a correct way. You just know, and you know when it bloody well isn't, right? When you feel all the kinks, or you feel the pain, or you feel all these spasms or whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
So you have an inner template of wholeness. And that is because you're in a perfect system called the universe. And by God, that universe is definitely resonating with your thought, but it's not just resonating with your thought. This is where the rationalists and even the idealists and even the scientists go wrong. There's other things happening within you. There's memory, there's moods. There's moods behind the moods. There's the body, there's the cells. The universe is speaking to you on all those levels, and we only hear it very faintly on one level, say the rational. Well, William Blake was saying, are you people crazy? This thing is talking to you all the time. Everywhere you move, everything you do is in harmony with the pleroma or the noumena around you. And you have to be constantly in touch with that. And if and when an aberration should come in the garden, right? People or yourself have these moments where things are definitely out of kilter. You've got to find out the origins of why that is off. Well, we've already spoken about most of them. If your homeostasis is off, as we said, it's probably because of the junk food or the alcohol, or again, it relates to culture, isn't it? If the biological parasympathetic is off, that's usually got to do with trauma. Trauma inflicted upon you by teachers or parents or, whatever other source it might have been. Again, we're back to, the culture. If it is psychic, it will still relate to the culture. If it's mental, it will probably still relate to the culture. So these things can be fixed. And my work deals in the great specialists, the Otto Ranks, the Ludwig Biddenswangers, the existential schools of both philosophy and psychology that have brilliant, brilliant ways for people to attend to these malignancies, whether it's in themselves or within culture. Nothing needs to be invented. It's all there. Many things we have failed to implement that have already been on the books. Other things are on the books but have never even been initiated. Like for instance, Ayn Rand. She said, look, civilization demonstrably progressed and became civilization when church and state were divided. That's how you got America. That's how you got Britain. That's how you got Canada. That's how you got Australia. That's how you got the progressive, most progressive places. And where you don't have the division of church and state, yeah, okay. Then she said that's half of man's journey towards complete freedom. Now you got to move to the next step and separate state and economics. Has that been done yet, even in America? Nope, not even close. No. So the state, the government, the federal system still is involved in people selling their products, selling their apples, teaching their practices. No, you got the state in there. What the hell has the state got to do with economics, she says? We've separated church and state. Let's separate state and economics. It's very simple. It's on the books. It can easily be done. Just because the founding fathers didn't do it doesn't mean we can't get there now. Let's go. Well, nobody listened. So look at the mess of the world. And then after that, there's other ones as well. So nothing needs to be reinvented. It's all there. If you don't want to implement it, then expect disaster, which is what we're getting. And so this works on the cellular level. It works on the mental, emotional level. There's solutions for absolutely everything. That's what wise men were all about. And the mystery of wise men, or the mentality, the mentation of those wise men and women, their creations, be it in music or poetry or mysticism or religion, whatever it might have been, philosophy, is still there. It doesn't go away. That's what history is. History is the most living thing there is. When I talk about that pre-conscious reservoir, that thing is heaving. That thing is alive. And you are in touch with it. But if those senses that connect you to it, like the imagination, have been shut down by parents, by society, well, then we're in disaster mode. And so we need to get into a culture that opens those gates again. Like he said, open the doors of perception. And when they are, hey, we have an incredible noumena there that to inform us, to instruct us. And so even though the hermit knows the limits of how far his light can go, but within those limits, there's still an infiniteness. There's still an incredible ebb and flow, right? And there's so much for him to digest and work out and bring down from the mountain into the world. And that's each and every one of us is that hermit. Each and every one of us is a channel to bring down either tyranny, more reasons for tyranny, or more doctrines of freedom. It's all based on the individual and how they themselves have not only manipulate their own will, but how they've synchronized their personal will, the human will, with the divine will. It's all based on that.
Wow, it's we could probably do a whole analysis of just that whole concept alone. I mean, you've done this in the past about the origins of evil and getting into some of the aspects of it, but when we get into the deep down reservoirs of where that exists, the potential for that exists in everybody, just like the potential for disease or health exists in everybody, right? Then you start to realize that, this isn't something you're a victim to. It's something you always have a choice in, but there are things that you have to do to get there. There are stages you have to go through. And going on this path is going to be full of all kinds of perils and obstacles that you're going to have to overcome. And there is one question that you were bringing up in the Hermit card about, does life work more for the wise man or for the fool? Mm-hmm. Is it designed to work more in one way or the other? Is that something that we determine ourselves? Maybe you just wanted to finish off on that point.
Yeah, well, that is a huge question. And it connects also with another one, and that is that it seems to be, when you look at time, when you look at the past, it seems that all the errors that man could ever make are repeated by the next generation. Very little, if any, of the wisdom. And I'm not satisfied with that. So my personal, and I know this is the case for you as well, but it's very important for us to be able to articulate it. And that is, my job is to not sit okay with that. I don't want the errors to be repeated endlessly. Even I know that may be the fact of the matter. I resist it. I'm against that fact. I think that the wisdom of the past is what should be repeated. And I don't give a damn about David Cameron or that fucking thing that's in the White House right now. I don't care about them, right? We're more powerful than them because we're aligned with the wisdom of ages. And, you know, I try to bring the work of the greats to my audience, you know, and also scrape away some of the lies that some of these filthy rats have put around these men. You know, it's not good for me. I don't like it when these people of the past have been misinterpreted. I'll tell you where, I think they were wrong, and I'll also tell you where they were right, and I'll tell you where they were misinterpreted. And I expect my audience to give me the time and the space to think about it because it's for their good. You know, and that way, that's my contribution to culture. And that's very self-reflexive, because the more you do for your culture, even though there may be a lot of failings in it, and often feelings of depression, but there's also a great deal of satisfaction from it. And it's not really even if other people are telling you that they're getting, good out of it. That's nice to have, but that's not what I mean. I mean just the act of doing it has its own reward. And so these other people go, but sure, you got 100 different people working for you, like you're really successful. They haven't a clue. I don't, number one, and I don't even really need it, because I'm getting out of this what I need, because it is holistic, it is vocational. I'm equally okay if other people come along for the ride and share this journey. That's a beautiful cultural aspect of it as well. But you see, I'm not victimized by that. So, yeah, there is a error. Somebody can look at it and say, I'm depressed by that, I just don't want to know about it. I certainly cannot do what you're doing, Michael. I can't do it. It's just terrible to look at the error that's being repeated and repeated and repeated. But see, where that person gets disenchanted, I get enthused. I say, yeah, but that's a horrible, like I said, in the evil is the answer, isn't it? I see that as an evil, and I want to do something about it. I don't just let it stand. That's a sign of tremendous weakness and unheroic behavior. It's not right to do that, because you're also desecrating the optimism and the journey of the ones before you. If they had all thought like that, we wouldn't have a culture at all. The fact that we've got any kind of culture, bad as it is because people didn't think like that. And they continued to write those books under great pain and want and cold and misery and poverty. Right? And they did what we're talking about, contributed to their culture. And they were given, even though they may not have had any money in the bank, they had awesome reservoirs, of wisdom and contentment within, because they knew that they were doing this. And so my job is to try and turn people onto that, of all age groups. I don't care if they're young listening or they're old, that's irrelevant, or from the East or from the West. You have a duty to maintain the culture and the traditions, and then to improve them, because they're not all just perfect. Some of them are needing a lot of polishing. Some of them need a lot of, changing. And so we have a duty to do that. But by God, that's full employment. And even if change isn't put into your pocket, like the hanged man, you see the coins pouring out of his jacket and they're on the floor, but he's got a smile on his lips anyway. Why? It's exactly what I'm saying. He's fulfilled, the higher aspect of that card anyway. There's a lot of negatives in that card, but the positive aspect is, hey, I don't care. I'm not put out. I know what my job is. I'm dutiful. And I'm doing it, even though you may think I'm suffering pain, I'm suffering want, I'm suffering loss. Yeah, but I'm doing what is right. And I'm, in my own way, bringing treasures of another kind. Treasures that are not just coins and material goods and gold and all that rubbish, that people are accumulating. There's treasures, vast treasures of another kind. And those are found in your culture, and they're also found in nature. And they're also found in the inner house as well. That's why I say man is an existential trinity, and he is more than just what he thinks he is. And when he's doing his duty, shall we say, and he's interlocking properly, or his will is operating, flowing in and out of those three realms, inner, outer, and the cultural, then he's a complete being. When any one or more than one of those particular spheres of operation are banjaxed or dysfunctional, then man himself, right, his eigenwelt can't be healthy or holistic. So right now we have forces in every corner of the world trying to get you to de-racialize and deculturize yourself. And I'm always interested in the underlying reasons why that is. And so if you see that is happening, well, I'm sorry, you have to step up and you have to do the opposite. You know what I mean? And that involves, as we said, physical work on your body and cultural work and a tremendous new relationship rapport with nature. And all of these things are required.
I couldn't agree more. And as you were talking there, it reminded me of that great passage from the Oracle of Delphi where they were talking about, within you is hidden the treasure of treasures. Know thyself and you will know the universe and the gods. And that statement has always really hit me in a very resonant way, because the more that we've gone on this track of analyzing just in this series of the Path of the Fool, and then going into all the psychology and studying the sociological aspects and the political aspects. And, I personally have gone from, like 0 to hero, just going on this track of looking at all of these different things and then reflecting back and finding what those treasures are really all about. And from that sense of knowing that even if you don't always know the way, and many times you are going to feel lost in the forest, and many times there's many things you can't maybe know right off the bat. But what I've always gleaned from all of this is that you gain a sense of confidence over time, that you can handle whatever forces come your way, you can handle whatever kind of obstacles are going to get thrown in front of you. You trust yourself to be able to deal with that because you've connected to your inner house and your inner sense of knowing. You've done that shadow work, and even if you have failings in the future, or even if you stumble here and there, you trust yourself, you love yourself enough, you know yourself enough that you can pick yourself up and get back on that track. And I've done it countless times in my own life. I anticipate it happening continuously. And with that kind of mindset, your mind is bulletproof, and you're not going to have your mind given over to toxic ideologies or just following along with the herd because that's what everybody else is doing, or giving up your rights and your freedoms, or allowing other people's rights and freedoms to be diminished. You're not going to be living in that mindset anymore. You're going to rise above that and express, the true nature of who you really are and bring forward your own potential in the world. So I appreciate doing this series and analyzing these cards from all these different eclectic points, because it's very, very valuable in the big scheme of things when you're talking about your own direction and your own path that you're walking in life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a good place to leave it.
Well, let's also maybe finish off just quickly. What's the next card coming up? And do you want to give people a little teaser on that?
Yeah, the Wheel of Fortune is a tremendously interesting card. It's often marginalized or just abbreviated, well, obviously it represents the sun. Obviously it represents the zodiac itself. Obviously it represents a clock face, time. That's why I've been laboring, through the series to talk about those subjects of time and cycles and fate as well. And it comes up as a reminder, the Wheel of Fortune, to step back again and look at the idea that it is a process, a never-ending process, because otherwise you might get too fixated on the idea of the cycle of time, because if a wheel moves, it spins. Yeah, if you roll a wheel, it makes a straight line. So even though it's a wheel, implied within the movement of a wheel is a linear process, actually. So it's kind of a paradox. And then if you focus in on the hub of the wheel, you have another perspective. Sort of like I said, the Hermit is the wheel from above, right? If you go upwards, look at the mountain, it is actually a kind of a wheel in a way, and the Hermit then makes the center of the wheel. So I'm probably going to get into the fact of the chart, the personal chart, which we've been talking in very broad terms through the series, symbolically, theosophically, astrotheologically. I'd like to take it down a step and remind people of, astrological charts, tarot charts. I have my own system, obviously, as taught in the mystery school. Might get into talking a bit about that. I have a forthcoming book early next year, which again deals with this more practical application, showing people easy spreads, easy way to get into the tarot by using their own astrological chart. Got my own particular way of doing that. Some of those systems are taught on the mystery school, but I have other elaborate systems. And so we might get into a bit of that on the Wheel of Fortune, just to bring out again some of the more practical aspects, because we've been doing this really heady stuff, even on this interview. It's very philosophical, and it's nice sometimes to, change the pace. And we're going to need to as well, because then we move on to justice and hangman. We're going to be back into very, very deep esoteric matters. By the time we get to hangman and death, we'll even be dealing a lot more with this whole parasympathetic, sympathetic, the body, how the body features, how the shadow work really entails the body. We'll probably be getting into more about that, I think. Not too sure, it's still a little bit up in the air, but I know that it will be quite heady again. So the Wheel of Fortune will be sort of stepping back and looking at it at a little bit different perspective, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I definitely look forward to it. I thoroughly enjoy doing these interviews and looking at these subjects, and I appreciate your time, Michael, and we'll definitely follow up in the future.
We will do. Thanks for the opportunity, Dave.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime. And thanks to all those that are listening and supporting this work, for those that have supported my channel and the show that I do, and also those that are supporting what Michael's doing, and many other great people out there that are really trying to bring this information to the fore in this time. So I just want to thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you again next time.